my name is Bozena Hrycyna, and today we're going to take a glimpse into the world of Rushnyk. Ukrainian embroidery is recognizable all over the world as a quintessential part of Ukrainian culture, and it's a vast tradition. And today we're just going to talk about the tradition of the ritual cloth, the Rushnyk. So the word Rushnyk just translates as towel, but it's really a ceremonial towel, not a towel you would ever wipe your hands on or use. In that way, that's practical. It's just used for gifting, for ceremony, for sacred objects, for bread and salt when you're welcoming somebody to their new home. Rushnyk is a ceremonial cloth, a ritual cloth. And the tradition of making rushnyk is very old, really ancient. It's probably one of the oldest traditions in the textile making of many cultures. In Ukrainian culture, it's very recognizable as a long piece of white cloth with some design, usually a woven band or embroidery just on the two ends. So as you can see here, we have a long white cloth with two identical ends that are decorated with geometric designs. This rushnyk is made on a loom and it's woven. It's not embroidered, but rushnyk are often decorated also with embroidery. So we have different kinds here. All of these have come from Western Ukraine or from people in Canada of Western Ukrainian descent. And they have sort of similar, you can tell, sort of similar patterns and colors and motifs. And there are also vastly different looking rushnyk that come from central Ukraine and eastern Ukraine that are very recognizable by their pronounced like red, all red embroidery on white. So I'm just showing you some images from a book that's about Ukrainian weddings. These are all wedding rushnyk. So rushnyk are used in ceremony, and the ceremony that's remained where almost, well, not everybody, but many people still use the rushnyk is the wedding. And it's very elaborate and beautiful in every region. There's some more examples. Even white on white, but with very delicate detailing and cutwork, mereshka. So you might have seen the rushnyk used in a wedding in the diaspora or perhaps in Ukraine. And rushnyk is often used for carrying or displaying the wedding bread, the kurovai. It's also used underneath the couple as they stand at the altar. They stand on the rushnyk. And when they're having a wedding in the church, the priest usually does bind their hands together with a rushnyk. So traditionally, women would have made many, many rushnyk in preparation for these special moments in their lives, especially for their wedding. They would have made several since as early as they could start making them. So as soon as they learned to embroider or weave, they would be making rushnyk in preparation for these special moments in their lives when they would be using these rushnyk in their wedding or bestowing them as gifts, honoring their godparents or their midwife or their matchmaker, all these people that supported them in these important moments in their lives. Today, this tradition is mostly lost, and that's just a reflection of the fact that we've lost a lot of connection to these parts of our lives where we actually have somebody really actively supporting us and making parts of our life happen, like the matchmaker or the midwife. And now we just kind of exchange, payment for services we get or something like that. So in a life like traditional Ukrainian peasant life where everything you're doing is handmade, you'd understand that making these cloths is a sacred preparation for the sacred moments in your life. So each woman would be making a rushnyk with the intention of imbuing good energy, good thoughts into the cloth. And that's why that cloth then is so revered and so special. And is so worthy of gifting to somebody in exchange for a really worthy thing that they do for you. Today we have the wedding, and often people gift a rushnik to their starosta, their elders, or people who helped with their ceremony. But many people buy their rushnike. Actually, it's like store-bought rushnike. But you could order actually a handmade one from a craftsperson who still makes them, or you could make your own. It's very doable. It's very accessible, and many people in the diaspora and contemporary women in Ukraine have started reclaiming this tradition and started making rushnike again. Many of them using cross stitch. So you could see in this rushnik and these three actually, that they're all kind of made with a similar stitch, which is the cross stitch. And that is a pretty simple and modern stitch that any design can sort of be translated into a onto graph paper and translated into cross stitch, because you're just following this geometric pattern. And so these are all made with that stitch. And all these rushnike I've actually collected in Canada from Ukrainian Canadian women who made them. So these are contemporary, the last maybe 50 or so years. This one's also from Canada. This one is from Ukraine, and it's a lot older, and it's made using a different technique. Similar to this, it's woven on a loom, and the pattern is actually woven. It is not embroidered, although it's very similar to embroidery, and it's sort of imitating that application of threads on top, but it's woven in on a loom. I've mentioned the materials a little bit. The threads are all made of cotton. The base of the rushnik, the fabric itself, is made of cotton in these instances, and also linen and hemp. So all these materials would be prepared traditionally by Ukrainian women in the village by themselves. They wouldn't really buy these materials. They would prepare them, grow them, and prepare them themselves. Today you can buy cloth and yarns ready-made and ready dyed and all ready to go. But traditionally women would grow the flax. So this is some dried flax in their gardens for the linen. So once you have this plant dried and it's retted, it's soaked, and it's broken up, and the inner fibers are taken out, those fibers are combed really finely, and they're made into raw linen fiber that is then spun. This is a hand spindle, but a drop spindle, but you could also use a spinning wheel. They're spun into yarn. So here I have an example of some linen yarn. And this is the natural color, closer to this darker fabric, very close to this one. But it can be processed, bleached in the sun to make it a lot whiter, processed to make it finer. And you would spin this and weave it into linen cloth. So here I just have some examples of linen cloth for you to see. This is really fine, very fine white linen. This would probably be saved for a very fine head wrap in the mitka, or a sorochka shirt for the wedding. Might not be used for a rushnik. Maybe this heavier linen would be used for a rushnik. Here's some hand-spun, hand-woven antique fabric from Ukraine. So you can still buy hand-woven fabric. And this would be a good width for a rushnik. So this might be used for a rushnik, actually. And this is naturally bleached in the sun. So it's not bleached using chemicals. So you have a natural coloring. Here I have some unbleached linen, factory made, but has that natural coloring from the fibers. And some hemp fabric. That's a very close color to that unbleached linen. And hemp was very, very common for fabric in Ukraine, especially for everyday use for shirts and even for rushnike. It doesn't get as fine as the linen, so it might be used for rushnike that aren't as special, maybe not for the wedding, but for other times. And I actually have some organic cotton hemp blend fabric. This actually would be great for making rushnike. It's got a heavier weight. So usually these fabrics, they're a little bit thicker, a little bit heavier, and they have what we call an even weave. so that you can count and make geometric patterns while you're embroidering. And here's an example of an even weave fabric that's contemporary called Ida cloth. It's used for cross stitching, and you can buy this at a craft store, and a lot of people use this for cross stitching. It's not as nice as a naturally woven fabric. This is meant for cross stitch, so the holes are kind of big and it's very obvious, but it's often used for embroidery. And here you can see the different threads that are used for embroidery today. The DMC brand from France that's used by embroiderers all over the world. And some fine wool that can also be used for embroidery. So in Ukrainian tradition, often fine wool was also used for rushnyk and for shirts, for sorochke. Very light weight, like a sock weight. Embroidery needles. And another scrap of linen with an even weave that you could practice on before you decide on your pattern. And here I have a whole box of different linens, different yarns of different weights and colors. This coarser and stronger linen yarn would be used for the warp, which is the base of your fabric that runs along the length. And then you would use finer threads, some of these finer ones, for the weft, which goes across, back and forth. And today you can order these yarns pretty much anywhere because of the internet. So these are very accessible if you want to make a rushnyk with all the traditional materials, the natural materials such as linen and hemp. Many people use cotton today because it's lighter, it's cheaper, and it's more accessible. You can also get a cotton or linen blend, which would still have a nice feel and weight like linen. So those are some of the materials used for making rushnyk. And today we have all the different options, but you can see that they originated from the traditions of the land. So where Ukrainians lived and what kind of climate they had and the plants that were growing in their gardens that they could use for making these beautiful cloths. Here's an example of an embroidered cushion. That's a really recognizable part of the diaspora culture that we see in lots of Ukrainian Canadian homes. And this would be like a rushnyk pattern that was transferred onto a cushion. So from this tradition of having ritual cloths, people started making things that were more like accessories for the home because this tradition started to become less important and less meaningful to people's lives as they no longer used rushnyk as commonly in their day-to-day lives. Of course, rushnyk are used in ceremony and in the process of gifting, but then where do you put them afterwards, or how do you display them or use them in your home? A lot of people would hang rushnyk over their windows in their homes, and I still like to do that because the rushnyk itself is carrying really good energy. It's seen as a very sacred object imbued with the good will of the person who made the rushnyk. So it has a protective quality. So rushnyk are hung with icons often, or over windows or over doorways or at crossroads because of their protective quality and their like talismanic function. So they're in themselves physically really carrying that energy, not just symbolically. So a window is an opening into the home, a very special place you want to protect. So you would put a rushnyk over your window as an entry point into your life. You should be striving to be keeping your mind clear and having good intentions and good energy while you're embroidering. And that's really an understanding that permeates all craft. I think anybody who seriously understands the transfer of energy into material in the material world will understand that everything that you're creating has ripple effects. So women would understand that to sit down and start a rushnyk, especially knowing the purpose of that rushnyk, if it's for their wedding or their betrothal or somebody they love, they would only want to pass on good energy. So they would be trying to maintain mindfulness while they're working on their embroidery. So I hope you learned a lot about Rushnyk today, this fascinating world of the ritual cloth that Ukrainian people have used for thousands of years. I could recommend many books, but I'll just recommend one website that I love using today. It's a great resource that a woman in Ukraine has started to share her knowledge of traditional embroidery and get people interested in these old stitches, old methods, and it's Prekrasa Studio. So you could look up prekrasastudio.com, Prekrasa studio.com. And they have wonderful resources and patterns and information about Rushnyk and many images you could delve deeper into this world. So enjoy.